little privilege of knowing Divya for a very short while, but such a dynamic person, and this Mentor My Board is like something which is totally very much needed, you know.
Right.
So thanks a lot, Divya, for your invitation on Mentor My Board and for kickstarting this interview series with Anil. Anil, it's really my pleasure as well as a privilege to know you, because I had this short conversation with you a little bit earlier. And then after that, you have been very kind to share your YouTube videos as well as your LinkedIn profile. Absolutely an honor. You
Thank
know,
you.
especially
Thank you.
in these torrid times of COVID, we need somebody who is actually showing the way out, not just as a leading light, but you're actually helping them out of this mess, you know, in a practical way. And this is where we are going in this interview series, that the directors who are there to guide the ship through
Right.
uncharted sea require somebody who's already been there and done that,
Right.
okay, or has a vision which they are not able to see because they are stuck in the middle of this. उलझे हुए हैं, जैसे ये.
Right.
So I have the pleasure to introduce Anil Sharma, who is the managing director of Leaders for Growth. It is an organization which is into executive coaching, management consulting, and engaged by private and public sector companies, primarily in the Middle East, where Anil's area of operations has been, as well as in India. He's been working with SANS, with Reddington and Gulf, and Al Futtaim, I think, which is the associate company or owner of company of Jumbo Electronics.
No.
So there was another lead which I could not get quite clearly, that you were with associated with Jumbo Electronics as
Right.
well. So I like the very clear vision which you have mentioned, that your idea for business coaching and for executive development is towards a positive, which is growth, which is measurable. It's not just
Right.
positive, it's measurable, quantifiable, lasting and sustainable leadership, growth for the leaders, and operational effectiveness in business enterprise. So from here, we would like to just take it away on the basis of the questionnaire which we have earlier shared with you. Can we start straight away on the questionnaire? I think that will be more effective. So we have indicated the time. So what we want you to do, Anil, would be to shortly share your journey as a director. How did you first become a director? Was it as an independent director or was it as a nominee director? 2 or 3 minutes on that, please.
Sure. So thank you, Divya, and thank you, Bharati, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure, and it's also a privilege to be sharing and discussing insights with you, two leading ladies of Mentor My Board, right? So great. Now, since you asked me about this point of journey, so the journey so far has been 29 years of business leadership experience, out of which 25 have been spent working in leading top tier companies, consumer durables, electronics, telecom, across Middle East, Africa, India. So this was the 25-year corporate life. So across these 25 years, I've been on the other side, which is what you call the executive management side, right? And then having learned the ropes, I switched over to the governance side. This is where the board journey starts. So the journey for me started in 2016 onwards, which is when I initiated my consulting firm, Leaders for Growth, DWC LLC in Dubai in June 2016. And subsequently, just in June of 2018, I moved into Mumbai. So what I do in this firm right now on a governance perspective, I provide consulting services in the area of one is performance coaching for business executives. And second is, of course, governance advisory, corporate governance advisory for companies who need this. So how come I morphed into this from the executive management side to the governance side? So how I have done that is because I have acquired specific behavioral competencies apart from my skill, knowledge, experience. So specific behavioral competencies in the area of one, corporate governance processes and board dynamics. So I got myself, trained through an organization in India. Second, the collaborative and performance focused behavior in a group setting, because in a board, you're required to collaborate with your other board directors, right? So you have to be, sometimes agree to disagree and move ahead in a way that you are performance focused without getting into ego traps. Third, you have to be comfortable with technology concepts and the applications of technology into business. Fourth of my competency was, when I looked at it, was looking at strategic planning and execution for delivering business goals. And of course, fifth, last point is a strong understanding of business finance. Now, without this knowledge, you cannot be, really delivering value to a board. And now, in this avatar, my mission is I partner with leaders and firms to help them build high performing organizations that get results. So this in a nutshell, 25 plus 4 years, 25 executive management, 4-year governance advisory. This has been my 29-year journey so far.
It's a very illuminating profile. Basically, you became a director when you started your company, or you were invited on? So because we are exploring how did you become a director?
Right. Okay. So I first started up my own firm, right? And then I was called in for governance services. So for example, in 2017, I was called in to deliver governance services into a company, into a big retailing company in Egypt. Now, after coming here in Bombay, in Mumbai, in 2018 onwards, I've been associated with another company called EDN Consulting Private Limited, wherein I was asked to come on board. Now, this company does work in education services sector. So I was invited to be part of the board there. And there's another firm, again, based in, Ahmedabad area. Now, this is a big education group, and they've asked me to come on board as a trustee member over there. So these are my, directorial stints that I have been engaging with currently.
So, how aware are you of corporate governance laws in India, particularly with reference to what is a number of leeways have been given for MSME? There's a lot of stimulus packages. So along with that, there are a lot of compliances which have to be taken. How aware would you be, and a general director on an MSME, how aware would they be to steer clear of all these things?
Right. So the corporate governance laws of, they started off in 2000, and then was a revision in 2013, which typically provide direction on what is the size of the board. So you have a 100 crore capitalized company or a 300 crore revenue company, which needs a director. What is the minimum number? What is the maximum number? So you have minimum 1 to maximum 15. So it gives you a direction on the constitution. It also gives you a qualification on what are the type of people that you want to on board as a director to provide those governance services. It also instructs you on the diversity needed, right? It also instructs you on the various committees that are needed to be formed, because when you are sitting at a board level, you are required to look at the externalities of the business, right? You have to look at the external environment, and that is related to, for example, the external stakeholders and your CSR commitments to the society, because CSR is like a debt you have taken from society and you have to pay back, right? And then, of course, you have to look at the regulations and the compliances, the audit functions, so that you are able to deliver a clean financial status to the majority as well as the financial stakeholders. But most of this typically functions are good for, as we say, mid cap, large cap, small cap companies on the Sensex and the NSE. At an SME level, we do not see a large application of this happening. There is a usual minimum number of people available, right? And these people typically, in most of the firms that I have seen, are from references that you bring on board. And these references are typically, you want to have connects into some business sphere, into some financing sphere, right? So most of the practices that a MSME company would file typically, now this is typical, I'm not generalizing, is at the end of the year, they would file, okay, these are the practices that have been done. But I am not sure if there is a quarterly board meeting happening, if there is a monthly business review meeting happening, right? And this is the reason why many of the MSCs are not yet fully engaged in the formalized economy. And once they come into the formalized economy, and there is a clear definition that the government of India has given, that if you come into a formalized economy, there are a lot of benefits available that you could take. So there's a lot of liquidity impetus that has been provided by the government, provided the MSME has been into the formalized sector. Because when you are in the formalized sector, you have a good track record. And there are now MSME companies listed on the SME stock of the BSE, right? So people who do the corporate practices, go through the corporate governance routines, they definitely have a lot of advantage versus those who don't, because then you have access to liquidity. And once you have a track record, you definitely get better exposure to various other channels of liquidity that you can prop up to grow your business. So this is my initial take in the 2 years that I have been operating in the Maharashtra Gujarat segment of MSMEs, that there is a lot to be done yet.
All right. So with regard to women directors, what is your take? Because we are anticipating that most women directors are inducted onto the board primarily because it's a family-run business, or just to fulfill that compliance, gap that so many, especially SMEs, companies which are listed on the SME platform, they have a gap that they have to fulfill. Okay, so just for that they enlist women directors. So how do you feel that induction of women directors without knowledge of the laws, how much does it impact the running of the business? Particularly as women are supposed to have that extra layer of empathy to be able to run the business in a different way, with a different mindset. So what's your take on that?
So let me touch upon the law again. The Companies Act 2013 says that public listed companies with capital base of 100 crores. Now, this itself is a very large target to achieve for MSME. So let's talk the public listed companies where the law says 100 crore or revenues of 300 crore. Now these companies should have a minimum of 1 woman director on board. So that's the minimum bar.
Right.
Many Indian companies did comply from 2014, 2015 onwards, and there are quite still many to onboard a woman director. I mean, they're saying, okay, we are still looking for it, right? But compare this to Europe, yeah? Specifically Norway, France, where they have a quota of 40% women directors to the board. And not only is the quota adhered to, I mean, there are already 40% plus women directors available on board. So that's the law part of it. Now, since you touched upon the empathy part, right? So let me, really stress upon it, why it is helpful. Because, for example, I am an investor, and in my investing philosophy, we need diversity. We need diversity to mitigate the value erosion risk that can happen in our portfolio companies. So the same way, good governance seeks to bring diversity into the boardroom, right? So you have a good governance diversity inside the boardroom. So women independent directors, usually there are many seasoned professionals like you, right? Who have acted as role models, ensured that the interest of women in the workforce, how many women in the place, is there a good enough atmosphere, environment for them, conducive for them to work, right? And they have pushed for hiring of more labor women workforce into the labor force. So which also brings in diversity across the entire firm. So women actually bring different perspective to the issues, be it about say fairness or inclusion or welfare of your workforce, and increase diversity in the workforce. They help in taking stock of, say, the minority shareholders' interest, and of course have a good handle on assessing risk perceptions on many issues. So net, in my opinion, if boards go beyond the quota and hire more women directors, they can only improve their governance processes and beneficial for the company. So that's my take on this.
Nice. So in the SMEs which you are coaching, in your perspective, what do you feel are what is the representation by terms of percentage in the companies whom you are coaching, where the women are director on the boards? And if they are directors of the board, have they been inducted in a professional capacity as directors, or because it is a family run business, or because they are representing a bank or a financing company, and by virtue of that, they have been put on the board?
Okay, in the area that I have been exposed to so far, unfortunately, I haven't seen a professional woman director. Simply because, yeah, the law does not mandate them to in their size of, capitalization. And so if there is a woman, she is there by virtue of she is the founder, right? So that's the limited perspective that I have seen in the MSME areas.
No, exactly like Divya.
Right.
Okay. Can you give 2 or 3 instances where you as a director have contributed, uh, preferably in the recent past, for course correction, like you said, strategic thinking, out of the box thinking, or lean thinking?
Okay. Right. So let me share with you an anecdote where I picked up, where I picked up this knowledge. So this was, I can share with you 2 instances. One is, and these are 2 crisis periods, 2 different crisis periods that I have seen. So where I got trained, first of all. So this was in the 2008 global financial crisis period, right? And I was handling a big distribution business in Dubai and based in Dubai for Middle East and Africa. And when the global financial crisis hit, there was tough times and the global financial system was collapsing. And this is where one of my group directors at the time adopted an immediate daily review of the cash flow report with a PDCA cycle, a plan, do, check, act cycle. So this was a grooming that happened with us. And the objective was, first of all, to stay solvent, right? Stay alive, survive. And how? So the how was defined to us: aggressively collect all customer AR, account receivables, plus liquidate all of the aged inventory or aging inventory and keep your inventory fresh and reduce incoming inventory from wherever we were importing. And of course, seek additional payment days from all your suppliers and vendors. So I was sufficiently trained during this period as amongst other business heads to drive solid outcomes from this daily cash flow report that was monitored by the director. And the result, we achieved our working capital reduction targets. We achieved our liquidity and solvency goals, stronger at the end of the consolidation cycle in the industry, because many of the weaker companies had actually closed down by the consolidation period, and their markets came into us. So this was my training during the first global financial crisis. In this crisis, what I have been doing is actually imparting the same knowledge and given my learnings and practical experience freely to the business directors in the MSME group that I have been engaging with, and actually giving them practical steps on: 1, timely and actionable strategies to survive and thrive; 2, I've shared with them 40 different strategies to manage cash flows in their business; and 3rd, I've trained them to ask the right questions from the financial statements to derive solid business insights. And when people, they go through a crisis, and sometimes you just need to provide them an example. And the recent example I've been sharing with my, business contacts is, given that I'm an investor in Bajaj Finance Limited. So this is a great company, in my opinion. I happen to recently listen to now this is in the public domain, so I'm just sharing the name. Their Q4 results, right, of financial year 20. This was done by the board members of Bajaj Finance. Now, apart from discussing the financials, the directors had already modeled 3 different scenarios, right, on the potential COVID impact, cost impact. And these 3 scenarios took into account detailed various factors like phasing of lockdown, behavior of moratorium customers, collection capacity management. So they discussed it with the analyst call. They discussed changes in regulatory forbearances. Now RBI again came back, right, with a again 3-month moratorium additional. And fifth, response of the economy post lockdown. So when a modeling exercise done by these directors, they presented such a transparent and granular report on their asset franchise, plus their collections plan. As a shareholder of this firm, I'm filled with solid trust now that on their governance practices, on their execution capacities. And for me, they have become a role model for other financial firms to emulate. When I share this example with my other business clients, so people learn by example. So sometimes they learn by coaching, but if you give them a practical example, it kind of cements the learning, right? This has been a major game changer for many companies who are looking to survive first and then revive and then thrive into the cycle.
Very perfect. So I was just reading, listening to one of your videos where you have mentioned that in the Yosemite Park, the bisons actually all band together and face the storm.
Right.
And running away from the storm. And when you run away from the storm, it actually, you are subject to for a longer duration. Whereas when you face it, it moves past you. So in your experience,
True.
in the MSMEs which you are coaching, what is the immediate storm which they are facing? One is, of course, the migrant labor moving back. One is the total loss of supply chain and the markets. There is a natural sense of panic right now. Because you are seeing that your markets have moved, your supply chains have moved because they're all MSME.
True.
They're all interwoven together.
True.
Even Bajaj Auto, there was an interview by Mr. Rahul Bajaj 1 week back. Okay, so they are talking about this total panic situation which has to be, because now the lockdown is being lifted. And people are finding that the supply chains have just vanished.
Yes.
So in this situation of panic, what would you advise directors or want to be becoming directors? What would they have to look at? What is the characteristic of the bison which they have to translate into this life to face this coming 6 months?
Right. So for the, there is a situation currently, and the first thing that people should be is not getting numbed. This is the first such situation. And there are then further drill down, there are two kinds of situations. People who are into businesses where the likelihood of revival in the next 6 months is bleak, very bleak. So I'm talking of people who are in the gym business and in the travel industry business. So here the situation is really bleak. Whatever you say and do, you have to first, instead of selling a travel package or instead of selling a restaurant food, you will have to first sell hygiene and confidence, right? And both hygiene and confidence will need time to build up in the consumer's eyes, right? So in this context, typically I would advise people that it's better to have a two-pronged approach always. A two-pronged approach relying on resilience and developing optionality, as it's called. So resilience meaning you develop a business which is strong enough and is a good franchisee and take cash flows from that business, accrue cash flows from that business, and try to build alternate different business models so that you are trying to, as they say, don't keep your eggs in one basket always. So you have to look at diversifications, look at what's happening to my business. So that is the resilience part. Develop your strong business, take the cash flows from there, deploy into some additional businesses that you can do, and spread your management attention to developing new revenue streams. So this is for people who are currently impacted, right? And for people who are looking into the future and looking at becoming directors, what they need is a definite level of upskilling that will be needed, right? And the upskilling, typically, if I talk of listed companies, for example, people will have to understand to question certain management efficiency as I say, key performance indicators of the business. So you have to ask questions at your board meetings. Whenever you have your quarterly meetings, which is, in my opinion, not enough. I would rather have a 45 day, frequency rather than a 3-month frequency. And the questions that you need to ask are around your management efficiency. And what is management efficiency is you typically ask questions around your return on capital. What is the business generating for me? What is the return on assets? So if all the assets of the business are productively deployed and are generating a return which is commensurate to what the competition is doing, right? So I always have to do benchmarking with respect to competition. And then what is the return on equity for the shareholders, for a different class of shareholders? You have minority, you have majority, right? You always have to focus on something called as cash conversion cycle for your business. So these are some of the KPIs that I would urge, upcoming directors to develop them on. Of course, the second major aspect is board education. Like, directors come onto a business, right? But they might not know sufficiently about the business. And this is where I would urge them to learn about the business in the first place, go into the field, talk to people, talk to customers, talk to, depots, talk to manufacturing locations. How does my business make money? Answer this question for yourself. And once you know the business model, you can understand what are the various externalities that can impact me, right? And third, wealth creation. This is the key aspect for being, on any board, right? So am I creating wealth for my shareholders? So there's a parameter that for every 1 rupee that you retain inside the business, and if you're a listed company, for every 1 rupee retained, your market capitalization should rise commensurately by 1 rupee. If you track this parameter, then you can, sometimes pat yourself on the back that, yeah, the board is doing a good job and I understand what drives the business. I ask the right questions, I influence the processes. So these are my advice for maybe upcoming directors.
I really appreciated that thing on wealth creation, because last time I remember when we had spoken, you said that the director should be somebody who's apart and should not go micromanagement, because that is the job of the CEO. So basically, right, it's a two-back person. This guy sees outside and strategically, the director, whereas the key managerial personnel and the CEO would be looking into the business. So that was very well put about wealth creation and the strategic position of directors.
Right.
Particularly in this COVID situation for the next 1 year, because there are some directors who are being coached by Divya, who would be actually making use of the series. So we were just, wanting to have some practical examples of this wealth creation right now, weathering the storm. So for example, if you are in a MSME where you have not been able to tap into or not got the benefit of the last mile implementation of the stimulus package, how as a director would you go about it? So if you're a director who is into, HR, so what are the employees, what are the benefits to the employees which you could tap into to understand? Like, for example, for PF, there are a number of, leeways given for the deduction from PF. How you can get this other PF for Mediclaim, for insurance, for those type of things. Then again, for getting the moratorium on paying back the finance immediately. Similarly for your core businesses, because in the supply chain, you'll be getting somebody and you'll be paying. So your payables and receivables, which impact the cash flow, which you were talking about, all that, how you as a director would advise the people to look into who are on Divya's, panel of mentees. So can you just advise in that?
Yeah, right. So there are a lot of initiatives that I have been, in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, as is called, and there's enough of, material available out there that directors can actually acquaint themselves with, that what are the options available. So when it comes to, for example, retaining your employees and, looking at cost, what are the cost reduction measures that I have? So first of all, there was a, kind of a pressure that you have to be paying salaries. but now that pressure has kind of eased off, right? And since the lockdown keeps getting extended, you are not getting your cash flows. So how can you actually expect to fund those cash flows? So some of the people that I've worked with, we have advised that instead of paying salaries, you can't pay salaries because you do not have the quantum of funds available. Is there something called as a sustenance amount, which is given out as a loan to the people that, look, we understand you need to sustain yourselves. So this is a, kind of an interest-free loan or a sustenance loan that will be given to you. And once the things open, we are able to get money back, your salaries start to flow. And this sustenance loan has a long tenure for you so that you can pay back interest-free, right? So we are taking care of employees. We're not letting them go. And in US, they have a word called furlough, right? So instead of laying off, we are saying you are furloughed, but with limited sustenance available to you. So stick with us. Of course, it requires a lot of relentless communication to be done with your employees, with your people. And if you're lucky that your employees are local employees, they're not going away, right? So eventually you can tap back into them. Now, for those who have actually gone away, what to do? So this is now two approaches, right? Two approaches. One, of course, you could look at automation, but automation again is a costly affair, cannot be done immediately. So then there's a lot of effort needed to onboard local people from your local area and then train them into your processes that you want to onboard people, right? So these are the people related aspects. And of course, when you go tap the market versus there are two types of or various types of financial institutions, but if I broadly classify them, you have the private and you have PSU financial institutions. So go to PSU banks, which typically have a kind of a social agenda coming from the government that, look, here are cheaper COVID funds or pandemic funds available, right? Now with the repo rate has gone down to say 4% recently. So it is quite possible that you might be able to avail new funds at the rate of 7.5%, right? And take these funds as a lifeline, or maybe increase your working capital, limits by another 10% at a cheaper interest rate, and maybe look at restarting your business, or maybe look at replacing some of the costly loans. And you might have costly loans 12% plus, right? So look at acquiring 7.5 and look at replacing 12%. So that's on the financing bit. Third, of course, on the cash flow side, what people are doing, going to their customers, right? And look, if you have some spare cash available, discount it for me and give it to me. And for those MSMEs who are actually supplying to corporates and PSUs, they have available from the last 2.5 years, a system called as TREDS, right? So trade TREDS, TREDS. So TREDS is a exchange. It's M1 exchange, right? And you go on this exchange, trade receivable discounting system. You could put up your bills, which have been accepted by suppliers and accepted by your customers, who are typically corporates or PSUs. And you will have financing companies who can instantly give you. Now, for example, what happens is any SME bill will be typically 45 to 60 day due period, right? And you want to discount your bills today. So go to the trade system today, and with 3 days, you can get your cash back at a certain discounted value. So again, which helps your cash flow. Right. So, measures provided by government that if you are aware, if you are well read enough, you can actually go out, reach out, and do various activities to protect your business.
Oh, brilliant. That's really brilliant. Also about markets, because not a lot of people have markets which are local, right. Even MSMEs. So how do you, in the short term, find new markets, and also in the long term, look for different markets, especially if you're, the shift is away from China. Right. So your supply as well as your markets. Right. So in the short term, in the long term, how do you go about as a director, because you are advising directors how do you go about finding new markets, finding new supply chains?
Okay. So companies typically who are in the export chain, they normally tie up with the export, development ministry. And this ministry actually helps that which are some of the friendly markets that we have been currently engaging with. And through them, tap into local exhibitions that happen. Now, given this pandemic situation, exhibitions are rolled out, right? So the government has now come up with an e-exhibition marketplace. So register yourself for e-exhibitions. So you are reducing your travel bill, right? And you are exhibiting your wares. So what you need to do is upscale yourself digitally so that you are able to showcase your products to overseas audience and then click deals from there. So that's on the one side. Now, the China manufacturing coming to India, it might happen over a period of time because there are various situations that need to fall in place. But today, for people who are in the chemical space, and there are a lot of them in Gujarat, actually, which is a chemicals and petrochemicals hub over there. So if you are already in the chemical value chain, if you are already in the pharmaceutical value chain, it becomes easier because global majors can tap into a ready-made product that is going out of India. So it is estimated that we are, suppliers as India, about 30% suppliers of the total pharma trade to the export, China being the biggest, right? So this becomes easy for pharma suppliers to either, upgrade or go backward integration and then develop new markets. But it might not be easy, for example, a metal production maker or a die maker, because there are some, friends of mine who are in the die making business. Now, these dies were made for traditional jewelry companies who made jewelry. Now, the jewelry stores are down and gold prices are high, so people aren't coming to them physically for giving specifications on die making, for example. Now, what these people will need to do is, of course, instead of the metal work and the physical work that they do, they'll have to appoint or maybe regroup together and appoint a digital ambassador for them who can actually showcase their products. And once the jewelry makers open online, you are able to transact, talk with your customers, technical specifications, and then have it manufactured and shipped it like an Amazon logistics would do. So technology adoption is key in this pandemic period. And this is the one that can actually take you closer to customers. That's my take so far.
Absolutely brilliant tips, Divya. I'm sure it's been very useful for your directors, want to be directors also. Yeah, Anil, two messages. One message regarding upskilling, one specific message about upskilling. And what is another idea which should come in the mind of aspiring directors? What should aspiring directors look to? Of course, one you said was wealth creation, but overall, two things we would just like to close this interview.
Of course. So let me think of this. You are going through one situation currently, which is called this COVID pandemic. This is kind of what they call a black swan event. Now, is this the end? Won't there be any other thing coming into the future? No. So risk management, right, is the one key element that new directors, aspiring directors will have to upgrade themselves with. And there's a new term, relatively new term, not very new. It's called ESG. ESG is environmental,
societal governance.
Governance, right? So companies seeking to grow will have to comply with ESG norms, right? And why ESG norms? Because environmental risk, climate change risk is now the biggest risk waiting to hit us after this COVID we have dealt with.
Yes, yes.
So unless you are familiar as a new director with the ESG parameters, and now if you're a growing firm, you will always need funds to fuel your growth journey. And global equity funds are focused on firms with good ESG scores nowadays. So apart from looking at your annual accounts, your annual report, you also have to enlist and see whether my company scores well on the ESG umbrella norms. So that is one key take that I want to give them. And of course, the other part I would think of is certain behavioral competencies for these people. So behavioral competencies in the terms of you have to have time bound, actionable, as I said, measurable strategies. Now, strategy is a key element, mostly misunderstood, right, across many spaces that I've spoken to. Now, strategy is about defining where I want to be 5 years down the line, right? And where am I currently? And how do I plot a chart to go from here to there? Now it's an easy question to ask sometimes. What do you see yourself 5 years down the line, right? But very difficult to answer because you do not know what is the situation going to be 5 years down the line. So a reverse questioning technique would be 5 years from now, right? And then work from there. Instead of saying what will change 5 years from now, let's go to the very basics that what will not change. And that gives you a solid underpinning to develop your strategy to grow your business. So modeling exercise is very key developing a good strategy for people, for upcoming directors, in my opinion.
Simulation, everything has been
Yes.
brought into, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been extremely enlightening and extremely, very rivetingly mentioned, each anecdote which you have told us about. And I think the very practical points which you have said, especially for 6 months and 1 year down the line,
Right.
I'm sure that Divya's, mentees would find this extremely illuminating. Thank you so much, Anil. It's been an absolute pleasure. So we'll just bring this to a close. Thank you very much.
Absolutely enjoyed doing this session with you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And before moving out, I have a last question which has been bothering me for a long, long time.
Okay.
There has been more than 200 directors, independent directors very specifically, have been moving out and resigning from Indian boards. So
Right.
what's your say on that? What's your take on that? And what would you say that why, there is lack of trust or confidence between the independent directors and the promoters? So very in short, if you can throw some light on that. That has been bothering, this question has been bothering me for a long, long time. And I've been asking so many people about it. But again, yes, too much of compliance burden, too much of expectations from independent directors, this is what the answers I have been always getting. So what's your say on that?
You know what? This situation has been seen and we have had many governance fiascos. And this is why the government has now initiated that the new rule of IICA as a body, to have a pool of knowledgeable directors. So they're trying to weed off this connections wala directors, right? And get in knowledgeable directors who are actually informed and know what they should be delivering. So for example, Divya, in a company, if I'm hiring a CEO or any person down the line, the company typically prepares something called as a job profile or a job description, right? They give certain KRAs, KPIs, they know certain behavioral competencies that the CEO should conform to. But there is nothing for non-executive directors or independent directors, right? So what is a person expected to do when he joins an important position? So this expectation is kind of being taken care of by government, that we need informed directors. We do not need any connections wala directors. And these directors, when they come in, they have a longer term outlook for the business and they do a good solid job rather than signing off on some annual accounts for people who don't even understand business finance, who would be good in certain things, but not in business finance. And if you're signing off on certain books of accounts without even questioning them, and when the first crisis is set to hit, you start to leave, why were you appointed? I mean, you were there for minority shareholder interest to be protected, right? But if you do not feel equipped enough, you cannot deliver a good job over there. So I think the government has done a first step to weed out certain, the hollow spaces and bring in quality people on board. And this is the time and the space and the opportunity for organizations like yours to actually coach, train solid people, aspiring directors to deliver solid value on company boards.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And last question to ask you before we wind up this, the interview series is what you expect Mentor My Board to come out with. Some very important thing, as you said, that yes, coming out with or making strong directors is very, very important. So, what one thing you really think that Mentor My Board should focus on?
Obviously, I would think that if you have a solid, training and testing module that the directors go through, and these modules have to be broken up into various elements, like there is something called as business finance. There is something called as understanding the business model concept. There is something called as understanding the laws of the land. I mean, so if you go through these various stages of business and people are trained and tested, so they know that there is a solid responsibility for them thing that they have to deliver. And if they don't, it's not a good thing for them to join a board and being ineffective on the board. So once people go out with a solid training deck, right, and then they have something maybe as a alma mater to fall on, to connect with the people back, to refresh, because knowledge is always getting updated and new knowledge is being generated in this country especially, right? So very important to stay updated. So this is where creating a platform, for example, for trainers, aspirants to interact with, and then refresh your knowledge and go back into the industry and deliver an effective job.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think your insights on especially the SME sector, how directors can really play a very, very important role has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for all those insights. And thank you for, Bharati for this interview series on behalf of Mentor My Board. And I thank both of you, Anilji, Bharati. Thank you so much. And, in fact, it's a journey. We all, have whatever knowledge we have gathered. It's our responsibility to share it with the next generation, share it with the aspiring directors. And I think that's the reason why interview series has been created, so that these records, these recordings are useful for the future directors to come. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely enjoyed doing this with you. Thank you, Bharti. Thank you, Divya.
Thank you. Thank you.